Chapter 1, Matsuo, Part 1. Life is tough here. Father is working many jobs to keep us alive, not to mention being a Japanese family in the U.S. I was born and raised here in Hawaii, but my parents hate that my brother and I haven't experienced the country and culture of Japan. They have already sent my oldest brother to the city of Hiroshima to live with my uncle. My big brother, mother, and I are being sent in a few days. I am very anxious and don't exactly know what to expect. Matsuo, Hachiro, are all your belongings together? We need to be at the ship in 20 minutes, called my mom anxiously. Today was the day that we had to set sail to Hiroshima. I'm going to miss you. Are you sure you want us to leave you here? Whispered my mother in the hallway to my father. I will be fine, honey. I will be sending you a letter every month as well as some money to keep you and the boys going. I promise. It won't be long until we all live as a family again, and said my father calmly. We all said our tender goodbyes, knowing it would be practically a year before we would see my father again. Okay, kids, out the door. Come on, boys, you can't be late, my father said as he reluctantly pushed us out the door. We loaded all of our suitcases onto the ship and we were on our way. As we left the harbor, several U.S. Naval Academy ships were blocking the harbor. Since we were on a passenger ship, they allowed us through. Mommy, why are they only letting us through? I asked. They know we mean no harm, Matsuo. You can never be too safe, she explained. I looked out over the broad horizon, and it really hit me then. This was no longer my home. After a long trip on the boat, we finally arrived at the harbor in Hiroshima. There were many tall buildings rising up in the sky, and very few trees, or any signs of nature for what that matter. It was so different from my past. We took a train to our new house and put our belongings inside. It made it seem for a short while that it was our new home. Boys, you must share a room, so I better not hear any fighting. This is difficult for all of us, my mother said sternly. My brother and I nodded our heads. We knew she had enough on her plate already. Mother, how long has it been? I asked. How long has it been since what? She answered in a confused manner. Since we left father. About a year, that's all, my mother said, optimistically, while she leaned in to give me a hug. We all missed him a lot, but none of us wanted to bring up that sensitive subject. But as fast as it was brought up, the subject was dropped. Honey, just relax and come listen to the radio with me to get your mind off things, Mother suggested. I listened to Mother and sat down on the couch next to her. I heard stories of kittens being rescued in trees, the weather forecast, and some sports records. As my mind slowly drifted from the radio, something urgent caught my mind. Urgent news. Japanese armies made the decision to bomb Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. My stomach dropped. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the radio. Who knows what was going through her head? Probably a million thoughts going a million miles per hour. All I could get out of my mouth was, "Is father okay?" My mother suddenly snapped out of her trance to answer me. I'm sure he's okay, Matsuo. We lived a few miles away from Pearl Harbor. I'm sure he's at home in just as much shock as we are. We will hear from him soon, she said to comfort me. Months later, we have not heard from him nor received any money. My mother got a job as a clerk to pay the rent. My school was soon shut down to give every student a job to support the war effort. Food was being rationed. We got 2 eggs per year. I quickly realized that this was a bigger deal than I thought. I'd received a job at a warehouse making uniforms for the army. One morning, August 6, 1945 to be exact, I got to work at 8 as usual, but my boss wasn't there yet. Oh, come on, I could have slept in. I know, and it's so hot out. He could have at least left the warehouse unlocked, complained my fellow workers. As they nagged on my boss, I sat against the warehouse and looked at the only view of nature in awe, Mount Hiji.
As I got up from my chair, I yelled, "Gentlemen, we might as well get started." As the room quickly fell silent, all eyes were turned towards me. My chief advisor, James Burns, walked up to me with a file in his hand. "Mr. President, what I'm about to show you will end this terrible war we've gotten ourselves into," he confessed. I began to feel anxious. What could it possibly be? James took a file out of his coat pocket and laid it on the middle of the table. He took a long sigh and said, "This is the plan for the atomic bomb." James stood up and interrupted me. "Both sides? What do you mean, both sides? The cost is too great. We can't just kill thousands of lives when we have a current plan set in place. We need to stay the course and continue with an invasion of Japan's mainland." The room began to become chaotic. with people yelling over each other to voice their opinion. The atomic bomb? What does that mean? As James explained the ramifications of the strength of the bomb to me, I began to understand the seriousness of the decision at hand. James' voice was quivering while divulging the details. The bomb's strength is unparalleled in today's society. Just the use of the bomb could scare the Japanese into ending the war. However, this could come at the expense of nearly 100,000 innocent lives. Everyone in the room turned their eyes at me. I began to squirm in my chair, uneasy at the idea that so many innocent people would die for our gain. I cleared my throat and explained, "Well, we need to weigh the consequences for both sides here." James stood up and interrupted me. "Both sides? What do you mean, both sides? The cost is too great. We can't just kill thousands of lives when we have a current plan to set in place." My mind had a tough time wrapping my head around the situation. If we were even to drop this bomb, where would we even drop it? I asked. James' tone began to break down as he explained the details. We would drop the first bomb on Hiroshima on August 6th. If the Japanese would refuse to surrender, we would drop a second bomb on Nagasaki shortly after. The room fell silent. After a few seconds, James leaned back in his chair and pondered. Now the only question is, should we sacrifice thousands of lives for this? As the advisors' voices became more and more cacophonous, I sat in complete silence and thought to myself the consequences of each decision. Dropping the bomb may kill thousands of innocent lives, but what about the lives it would save in the long run? An invasion of Japan would cost just as much, if not more, American lives and take years and more conflict. While the cost would be high at first, it would probably save more lives in the end. As terrible as it sounds, I believe that this is the correct decision for the United States. Quiet down, quiet down. I've made my decision, I yelled. The room immediately fell silent as I gazed at each of their faces. We must use the atomic bomb. It's the only way. James instantly rose from his seat and stammered, "Mr. President, you can't do that. The consequences are too high." "Think of all the American lives we'll save by doing this, James. It's the only way we can end this war without losing any more American lives." Everyone in the room looked shocked, but they quickly understood my logic. James looked at me and silently nodded. I looked at the group and ordered, "This meeting is over. Contact Colonel Tibbets and inform him of this new mission." Tangy barbecue chicken, steaming green beans, and creamy mashed potatoes. It was just a normal family dinner as of now. My family and I were participating in a familiar dinner conversation. My son received a detention at school that day, and my wife, Lucy, was spilling to me her feelings on the neighborhood gossip. In the middle of Lucy's ranting, I received a phone call. Never would I have thought that this phone call, on such an ordinary day, would be so crucial and life-changing to millions of people. Ring, ring, ring. As I know what I was to answer the phone during dinner, I had a strange feeling that it was urgent. "Hello? May I speak to Colonel Tibbets, please?" a man said in a stern voice. "This is he." "Hello, Mr. Tibbets. This is James Byrne, Chief Advisor to President Truman. You have been considered for a top-secret assignment that we think is right up your alley. Do you have a minute?" Mr. Burns sounded nervous. "Yes, sir," I responded and excused myself from the dinner table. My wife looked at me in confusion. As I walked into the garage, I couldn't help but think what it could be. Some cargo to fly over a border? People stranded on an island? Some kind of ocean rescue? Little did I know, this was one of the most monumental decisions I would ever make. I answered to Mr. Burns, and he informed me that the Japanese would not surrender, but he had a plan. Our top scientists have developed technologies we feel that can put an end to this war. Over the last few months, our military has been confidentially testing the effects of 2 different types of atomic bombs, and we plan on hitting the Japs with both of them. Several intricate strategies have been thoroughly considered, and we have decided upon that ends with the fewest American lives lost. Also, the quickest means to Japanese surrender. Your government believes you are the perfect pilot to carry out our plan. Your country needs you. Colonel Tibbets, are you up for it?" "Well, when are you leaving? What kind of testing? Where is it? Who else is going on your business trip?" My wife was questioning me so suspiciously, and quickly I did not even have time to think of my answers. Wow, I can't believe they chose me out of all the pilots. I must have really made an impression on them. As I thought about it, how flattered I was by their choice, I realized those feelings would soon fade. I walked back into the dining room to my wife, cleaning up the kitchen. "What was that all about?" she questioned. I had already debated in my head if I should tell her or not. I decided I should keep this mission quiet so she would not worry about me. Or worse, try to convince me out of it. My country needed me, and I wasn't about to let them down. I am leaving in a week to go to Utah's Wendover Army Airfield. It's just testing the capabilities of a new plane. No big deal, honey. They're putting us all together in what's called the 509th Composite Group, apparently. It shouldn't take long. I explained my wife was so suspicious and confused. I could read it in her expression. I felt horrible lying to her about this. I really did. But I know what is best for my family. I knew I better keep this to myself. I was staring at the crimson red button in remorse. I was so anxious. I could barely function. I looked out over the city one more time. Then a deep beeping noise was coming out from under my palm. I had dropped my hand onto the button and the bomb began its journey through the sky.
Suddenly, sirens all over the town erupted in blaring horns. "What the hell is going on?" screamed a fellow worker frantically. Soon after, I heard the roar of the Boeing B-29 airplane soar over our heads. We all ran behind the building to take cover, and I saw something drop from the center plane. It was an atomic bomb slowly dropping from the sky, and it lowered into Mount Hiji. There was a few seconds of complete and utter silence. Then, suddenly, there was a blinding flash of white light, and the silence was gone. Screams erupted instantly as the shock wave came through. I got knocked off my feet violently and dropped onto the cement. I was knocked unconscious. I woke up, brushed myself off, and rose to my feet slowly. Then I look up in the sky and see a giant mushroom-shaped cloud with every shade of red, orange, and yellow intertwined within each other. I was in a dreamlike awe for what seemed like hours. Once I regained full consciousness, I ran back home to find my brother and mother curled up safely in my bedroom, scared to pieces. I explained to them what had happened and my experience. They were as shocked as I was. We all stood and hugged each other as we heard the moans and screams of those who were less fortunate than my family. "So nobody is hurt, right?" asked my mother reassuringly. "No, we are all fine, mother," I replied. "Then we need to get out there and help our fellow citizens who aren't fine. Hachiro, you round up as many unharmed people as you can and tell them to meet us at the hospital. Matsuo, you bring as many harmed people to the hospital before it's too late," Mother demanded. We all split ways and met at the hospital. 90% of the doctors were severely hurt or dead. "Everybody, set up as many beds as you can and wrap as many wounds as possible," my mother yelled across the collapsed city. I was so proud that she took control to help our city. My family and I continued to volunteer at the hospital for many months and saw many loved ones hurt. There was a great friend of mine whose body was so distorted I could only recognize him by his voice. After all of the horrid and disturbing sights we witnessed, it was all worth it. We had saved many people's lives that couldn't have done it without us. Following the explosion, all three characters were affected differently in the aftermath of the bombing of Hiroshima. While it ended World War II quickly, Truman regretted the heavy consequences of thousands of innocent lives being lost. Colonel Tibbets, while as proud for carrying out his duty for his country's protection, also deeply regrets being the catalyst for the loss of innocent lives. Matsuo was thankful that he could be in Japan at the time of the explosion to carry out the virtuous deed of taking care of his family and his fellow citizens.